These little steps eventually build onto something really big, and it also builds your confidence and it allows you to continue to network. So the very, very first step for everybody who wants to begin to expand their network is to start.
Hello, stereotype breakers, and welcome to yet another episode of the Meaningful Conversations podcast. Today's topic is networking. We're going to be talking about how to improve your networking skills in order to grow your career in technology. My guest today, Nelo, has grown her career in data science in part because of her networking skills that she has developed over time. It wasn't an overnight success, of course. It was working and working and working on them. And she will give you tips on how you can build your networking skills as well. But before we get into it, let me introduce Nelo, who is a data scientist with a Bachelors and Associates degree in computer science, who prides herself on being a self taught programmer. She taught herself Python and she has over 5 years of professional working experience. She has worked with several Fortune 500 companies in the United States and now works with a tech startup called Thrasio as an analyst engineer. She strongly believes that technology is the new gold, so she dedicates her time teaching her growing online community about tools and resources to help them successfully switch into tech and grow their new tech careers. She also recently published a free guide on how to transition into tech, which you can find a link to in the description. All right, without a further ado, let's dive into our conversation with Nelo on all things networking. Hi, Nelo, how are you doing?
I am great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic and so excited for our conversation because, like we talked about before on Instagram, networking is such an important topic, an important skill to develop. So I'm super excited to have you on as someone who has practiced networking so much and who has seen the impacts of it on her career. So super excited to talk to you about this today.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be on. I love to talk about networking and I learn from every time that I have conversations about networking. So I'm super excited to be doing this.
That's awesome. Honestly, I feel like that's the best kind of approach to even conversations about something. It's like every time I learn something new. I
Yeah.
love it. So let's dive into it. We
Mm.
all know that networking helps with our career growth, and you have shared how it has transformed your career trajectory on our Instagram Live. However, it's also this big, scary thing that a lot of us, especially introverts over here, dread. So, how can we get over this fear of networking?
I think like everything in life, you have to practice, right? So if you want to begin to expand your network, don't just feel like you need to build 1,000 network at one time. It has to be a gradual process, right? So maybe connect with and it really does depend. In today's world, there's so many ways that you can actually meet people, and it's so much easier now because there's the internet, right? You don't even have to necessarily go to in-person events. You can network via LinkedIn for your career. I know that there is this platform where I believe it's called Meet, where they host a lot of tech events. So there's so many ways that you can actually do it. And if you're somebody who has that fear, you can begin to engage with people online before you start having in-person conversations, right? So it's always going to be a gradual process. It's something that you eventually have to build on. But once you start, you find that it becomes really easier, right? Once you start, it becomes really easier. So I always say the biggest thing is to start, right? Start from somewhere. It could be just going for your first networking event. It could be just sending that first really scary email or that first really scary DM to meet somebody that you really like, or even just ask a question to a mentor. These little steps eventually build onto something really big, and it also builds your confidence and it allows you to continue to network. So the very, very first step for everybody who wants to begin to expand their network is to start.
Absolutely. And it sounds like networking, just like confidence, is a muscle, and you have to continue practicing and practicing it to build it up, which leads me to my next question. What steps would you recommend for a networking newbie to take in order to build up their networking confidence?
I would say, first off, learn how to approach icebreakers. You would need to learn how to break the ice when you are approaching people. You would need to familiarize yourself with what actually works for you. So, do a lot of trial and error as you are networking. Figure out what warms people up, figure out what's your best smile, what's your best posture, and things like that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like a job or like a routine. Think about it like making friends, right? So also always remember that it's a process. Like you will get better. Your confidence is going to grow. So first step, obviously, practice icebreakers. If you need to, I would say practice how you approach. If you plan on going and actually meeting somebody and you need to actually practice your conversation, this is something that I used to do myself. Do that and practice those conversations before you actually go into that conversation. That way, you don't have to actually think on the spot. You actually like already like have an idea on conversation status, like things that you can bring to that conversation. So if you need to practice before you actually go for that networking event, before you go approach anybody at all, practice icebreakers also, and then finally the body posture, smile, tone, and everything.
Oh my God, practicing is such a huge, huge part of building your confidence. Honestly, that is how I built up confidence negotiating or doing anything. I would just practice, and that
Mhm.
was mostly through canned responses in my email. That's how I would practice negotiation at the beginning.
Oh
And
wow,
it led to building confidence.
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's
Interesting.
it, it's really crazy, but yeah, that really really works.
Hmm.
So very curious because whenever I think of networking, I immediately visualize this dusty hotel conference room where people are clustered around the snack area, and you're kind of like, at least this is me, sweating and thinking, okay, how do I approach this person to make a connection or make an introduction? But, you know, actually, networking can look differently, right? It doesn't have to be done in that way, and it can be seen as making friends. And, like you said, finding things in common. What are some of the most surprising and unexpected ways and fun ways in which we can build our network?
There's so many ways to build your network. Like I said earlier, the easier way really in today's world is online, and it's less scary because you're not actually having to deal with in person. You're not having to actually deal with a person, so you can hit send and just like hope that nothing happens. But that's still like making a move, right? You're communicating, you're still connecting with people regardless. One of the easiest way to begin to build your network is really online. Again, events. I recommend events, joining communities. And if you do join these communities, in the comment sections of these communities, make sure that you're engaging, right? Don't just join a community and not participate. Make sure that you're visible. It is so important to be visible. It takes a lot of courage, but once you begin to tap into the benefits of actually being visible, you would see how important it is to continue to be visible. And there's so many benefits that come with that. So when you do like show up somewhere, try to show your value, right? What are you bringing to the table? That's one way to connect with people as well. People will pay attention to you more when you have something valuable to say to them, right? Or even pass a compliment, say, hey, you look really nice. That will make them smile, and then you can continue to engage. So that's like an icebreaker, right? As opposed to just going head on to say, hey, I'm trying to, or just make it something really awkward, right? So there are a lot of approaches that you can really use to build your network. You need to learn about how to like break the ice and make people feel comfortable. You need to learn about how to be approachable. You need to learn about, just being someone that's likable, and then trying to be visible as well in rooms, in the communities that you belong to, on your social media, even. That's a good way. People will pay attention to you if you are consistent and you show up, and you're building a network that way too. So there's so much power in just being visible and seen.
Absolutely couldn't agree more. And the social media part of it and, personal branding is such an interesting aspect of it too, and how we can use that to our advantage. I want to change gears a little bit and talk about how to keep one's network warm, so to say. Like how do we keep in touch with people that we have already met and who are in our network? Do you have any recommendations on how often should we check in with them and how? And would you recommend keeping track of certain things about them that we know? So, for example, names of their pets or children or interests or something that you have in mind. Like, what would you recommend there?
I definitely would recommend keeping track of people. It can be challenging to do that, honestly, especially if you have a large network of people. You may not necessarily be able to, remember the names of everybody's pets or, something really significant. But, again, checking in is also one way that you can constantly keep that relationship warm. Gifts, I am a very big gifter. So I always try to not even necessarily because it's your birthday, but just do something nice for people. Like they would always remember, like, oh my gosh, she did this, or she did that. Or like invite people for things. If you find something that is resourceful, share it with them. Say, hey, I think you might like this, the last time you mentioned this and this and this. So there are many ways to kind of just encourage that warmth in your relationships. I like to think that relationships and networks don't necessarily require like consistent. I wouldn't say that you have to check in with people weekly to keep it warm, but I think there's always, if you can leave a lasting impression, people would always remember, like, oh my gosh, she did that, and that relationship will be hard. That network, it'll be hard to turn that sour because you made a really, really good impression. So it's always good to like go strong, especially if it's a connection that you really want to keep and maintain. I would, send gifts, pay really nice compliments, remember things that are important to these people. That really kind of helps maintain the warmth in the relationships.
I love the gifting part. That's such a nice little touch. And also, like you mentioned, like if you find an article or something like that, that's just such a tiny little thing,
Yeah.
but it's important. It's like it's reinforcing the connection between you and the other person. So it's awesome. It's wonderful. Thank you for that tip. I honestly need to get better at that because, well, I feel like there's always room for improvement for anything. My final question for you is what are some of your most favorite three favorite icebreakers? Because you've already touched upon the topic of icebreakers. What are your three favorite icebreakers that people can use to make the first interaction, the first outreach less awkward?
That's a good question. I would say, first off, a compliment, obviously, works every time. People love to hear about themselves and how they look good. So, a compliment would definitely make whoever it is you're paying that compliment smile. So, I recommend compliments. Just caring. It mustn't necessarily be a compliment, but you can just say, hey, how are you doing? Like, be polite, right? When you approach somebody, your tone, your facial expression, body language, these things are things that people pay attention to. So make sure that not only are you passing a compliment, but you're also mindful of your body language and your facial expressions and also the tone that you're approaching the person with. Make sure that it's welcoming. And then lastly, smile. Like I said, just be approachable and friendly. It's always hard to say no to somebody who has like, people feed off your energy, right? Energy like transfers. So if you come off with like really positive energy, 80% of the time you will get that in return, as opposed to just being neutral, right? So go strong, right? Go strong with like positive energy, smiling, a nice tone, facial expression, and then pass a compliments. These are three things that I would recommend.
And those are awesome things because not only does it make you feel better about yourself when you're smiling, right? And, saying nice things to the other people, but it also, my head straight away went into our, animalistic responses, and how that, I don't want to say brings the guard down in a way, but in a way it does, if you know what I mean. And
It
it
does.
warms up the other person to a potential relationship, and that is a huge step. They're not in defensive, right? Because that's what
Mhm.
you want to prevent. So
Yeah,
you are opening them up to a potential relationship. I always find it very interesting to see how, some of the things that we do in social life are still reminiscent of our animalistic responses, fight or flight response and all that stuff. So it's just like that's where my head went. Immediately.
yeah, I can relate to that. At the end of the day, we have that animalistic thing in there, right? It's always gonna be there.
Mhm.
So
Nello, thank you so, so much for sharing your tips, for sharing your advice, and like I said on Instagram as well, for creating the wonderful content that you're creating, for
thank
helping
you.
other people network, grow their careers, and get into data science. We need more people in those fields, and especially women. So please
I
continue
agree.
doing what you're doing. You're amazing.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be on. Thank you so much.
Nello, thank you so much for sharing your advice, your story, and your tips, your actionable tips and scenarios and examples on how to network more effectively and how people can get started networking because it's such a powerful tool and it's a muscle that we all need to build, that we all need to work on. Learn more about Nello and her work and find all of the links to it in the description down below. Let me know what you thought about this episode and if you have any go to icebreakers or any networking tips or tricks. Or, share your story on how networking has transformed your career and helped connect the dots. Because I really think of networking as connecting the dots. You're just connecting people. Like this episode if you've enjoyed it and share it with a friend who is currently trying to network or learn how to network or grow their career, and networking might be the answer. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and to this podcast if you haven't already, and we can also be friends on other social media. You can find us as Stereotype Breakers. Have a wonderful time today you're currently experiencing. Bye.